The quiet, peaceful campus of Gallaudet University was a sanctuary for students. Known for its vibrant deaf community and commitment to providing education to those with hearing impairments, the university was considered a safe place, a home for many. But in the early months of 2001, this tranquility was shattered when the body of Eric Plunkett, a first-year student, was discovered in his dorm room. Eric was well-liked. He was known for his warm smile and friendly nature. But now he was lying lifeless, his skull crushed by a blunt object. There was no immediate suspect and police were baffled. No one had seen or heard anything suspicious. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only silence. Students were on edge. How could something like this happen in a place where everyone was supposed to feel safe? Was the killer one of their own? These questions echoed through the minds of everyone on campus. But as days turned into weeks, the trail grew cold. The investigation seemed to hit a dead end, and life at Gallaudet slowly returned to normal. But the unease lingered. No one could shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Then, just as the campus was beginning to heal, another murder took place. This time, the victim was Ben Varner, a fellow student who lived in the same dormitory as Eric. He was found in his room, his throat slashed, the brutality of the attack shocking even the most hardened investigators. 2 murders, 2 young men, and no answers. The fear that had gripped the campus after Eric's death returned, stronger than ever. The killer was still out there, watching, waiting. As news of Ben Varner's murder spread, the campus descended into chaos. Rumors flew in every direction. Some whispered that it was the work of a serial killer, targeting students at random. Others speculated that it was someone from within the tight-knit Gallaudet community. Whoever the killer was, they seemed to strike without warning and disappear just as quickly. Security was tightened. Curfews were imposed. But despite these measures, the fear was palpable. Students began locking their doors, walking in groups, and avoiding the once bustling social areas. Trust was eroding. Friends looked at each other with suspicion. The sense of safety that had once defined Gallaudet was gone, replaced by paranoia and dread. The police were under immense pressure to solve the case, but they were working with almost no leads. Both Eric and Ben had been quiet, unassuming students. Neither had enemies, nor did they seem to be involved in any dangerous activities. The murders didn't fit any recognizable pattern. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses. It was as if the killer knew exactly how to cover their tracks, leaving investigators in the dark. Then a chilling realization dawned on everyone. The killer was still among them. They had to be. The 2 victims lived in the same dormitory on the same floor. Whoever was responsible knew their victims well enough to avoid detection. The police began to focus their investigation inward, scrutinizing students and faculty alike. But with so little evidence to go on, they were grasping at straws. As weeks passed without an arrest, the tension on campus reached a breaking point. Students began leaving Gallaudet, terrified that they could be next. Parents called their children home, unwilling to take the risk. What had once been a thriving community was now a ghost town, its hallways empty and its classrooms eerily silent. But even as the campus emptied, the killer remained in the shadows, biding their time. Just when it seemed like the investigation was going nowhere, a breakthrough occurred. A student named Joseph Mesa Jr., a popular and seemingly well-adjusted sophomore, was brought in for questioning. At first glance, Joseph appeared to be the last person anyone would suspect of such brutal crimes. He was friendly, outgoing, and had no history of violence. But there were small inconsistencies in his story, little details that didn't quite add up. As investigators dug deeper into Joseph's background, they discovered something shocking. He had a history of financial problems and had recently been caught stealing from other students. Could this have been the motive? Was Joseph killing his classmates for money? The theory seemed far-fetched at first, but then investigators uncovered a disturbing pattern. Both Eric Plunkett and Ben Varner had lent Joseph money shortly before their deaths. And when police searched Joseph's room, they found items that had belonged to both victims, including Ben's wallet and Eric's watch. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough to make Joseph the prime suspect. He was arrested and charged with the murders of Eric and Ben. The campus, which had been gripped by fear for months, breathed a collective sigh of relief. The killer had been caught, or so it seemed. But as Joseph sat in a jail cell awaiting trial, the full story of what had happened at Gallaudet was only beginning to unfold. There were still questions that needed answers, and the truth, when it finally came out, would be more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. In the days leading up to his trial, Joseph Mesa Jr. maintained his innocence. He insisted that he had nothing to do with the murders and that the stolen items had been taken during petty thefts, not violent crimes. But the pressure was mounting, and as the evidence against him grew stronger, Joseph finally cracked. He confessed to both murders, but his reasoning was chilling. According to Joseph, he had killed Eric Plunkett in a fit of rage. The two had argued over a small debt, and in a moment of uncontrollable anger, Joseph had bludgeoned Eric to death. Afterward, he panicked and staged the scene to make it look like a random attack. But the murder of Ben Varner was different. Joseph claimed that after killing Eric, he had felt a strange sense of power. The fear and chaos that had swept through campus in the wake of Eric's death had excited him. He wanted to feel that power again, so he chose Ben as his next victim, attacking him in the same dormitory, just a few doors down from Eric's room. As Joseph recounted the details of the murders, investigators were horrified. His calm demeanor, his lack of remorse, it was as if he had been recounting an everyday event, not the brutal killings of two young men. The true extent of his cold-bloodedness was now clear. But even with his confession, there was still one lingering question. Why? Why had Joseph, a seemingly normal student, turned into a killer? The trial of Joseph Mesa Jr. was a media spectacle. Reporters from all over the country descended on Washington, D.C. to cover the case. It wasn't just the brutality of the murders that drew attention, it was the setting. Gallaudet University, a place known for its inclusivity and safety, had become the backdrop for one of the most shocking crimes in recent memory. In court, Joseph's defense team tried to paint a picture of a young man who had been pushed to the edge by financial stress and mental health issues. They argued that his actions, while horrific, were the result of extreme pressure and a momentary lapse in judgment. But the prosecution countered with the cold, hard facts of the case. Joseph had not only killed Eric Plunkett in a fit of rage, but he had also chosen to kill Ben Varner weeks later, purely for the thrill of it. Witnesses were called to testify, including fellow students who had known both the victims and the accused. The emotional toll on the Gallaudet community was clear. Many of the students who took the stand broke down in tears, recounting the fear and confusion that had gripped the campus in the wake of the murders. As the trial progressed, it became clear that Joseph Mesa Jr. had carefully planned his actions. He had known both victims, had gained their trust, and had used that trust to lure them into vulnerable positions. The jury was shown graphic photos of the crime scenes, and as the evidence mounted, it became increasingly difficult to imagine any outcome other than a conviction. But even as the trial neared its conclusion, there were still those who couldn't believe that Joseph, the friendly, well-liked student, could be capable of such horrific crimes. After weeks of testimony, the jury finally reached a verdict. On the morning of May 15, 2002, Joseph Mesa Jr. was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. For the families of Eric Plunkett and Ben Varner, the verdict brought a sense of closure, but it could never bring back their sons. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, eager to get reactions from those involved in the case. But for many in the Gallaudet community, the trial had only reopened old wounds. The fear and trauma of the murders were still fresh, and it would take years for the campus to heal. Joseph was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, a far cry from the life of promise and potential he had once had. As he was led away in handcuffs, he showed no emotion, no remorse. To him, the murders were just events in the past, actions he could not or would not explain. But the story of the Gallaudet murders would live on. It would be remembered not just as a tragic chapter in the university's history, but as a reminder of the darkness that can hide behind even the most familiar faces. In the years following the murders, Gallaudet University worked hard to restore a sense of safety and community on campus. New security measures were put in place, counseling services were expanded, and memorials were held for Eric Plunkett and Ben Varner. But the scars of what had happened were slow to heal. Many students who had been at Gallaudet during the murders never returned. Some transferred to other schools, unable to shake the fear that had taken root in their hearts. For those who stayed, there was a sense of resilience but also a lingering sense of loss. The murders had changed Gallaudet forever. For the families of the victims, life would never be the same. They had lost their sons in the most brutal way imaginable, and no amount of justice could bring them back. They would always carry the weight of that loss, a burden that time could never fully erase. As for Joseph Mesa Jr., he remained in prison, his story fading from the headlines but never from the memories of those who had known him. His actions had left a permanent mark on Gallaudet, a stain that could never be washed away. The Gallaudet murders were a tragedy, a senseless act of violence that shattered lives and destroyed a community. But they also served as a stark reminder of the fragility of safety, and the darkness that can lurk in even the most seemingly innocent places. The aftermath of the Gallaudet murders, the university, its community, and the broader world grappled with profound questions. How could such horror unfold in a place dedicated to learning, understanding, and inclusion? Could anything have been done to prevent it? These questions led to important conversations about campus safety, mental health, and the need for greater vigilance, especially in close-knit environments where people might not expect such danger. The tragedy highlighted the need for educational institutions everywhere to take proactive measures to ensure the safety and well-being of their students and staff. Gallaudet University became a model for implementing comprehensive mental health services and security systems designed to identify potential warning signs before they escalated into violence. For the deaf and hard-of-hearing community, the Gallaudet murders were a devastating blow, but also a catalyst for change. Advocacy groups worked to ensure that students with disabilities received the same level of protection and mental health resources as their peers. The tragedy underscored the need for specialized services that took into account the unique challenges faced by this community. On a broader societal level, the murders at Gallaudet sparked conversations about how isolation and untreated mental illness can lead to violence. While Joseph Mesa Jr.'s actions were inexcusable, they prompted reflection on how early intervention might have prevented him from becoming a killer. The case served as a reminder that violence can stem from unresolved pain and trauma, and that addressing these issues early on can save lives. As the years passed, the Gallaudet community worked to rebuild, honoring the memories of Eric Plunkett and Ben Varner by fostering an environment of compassion and vigilance. The campus became a place where students, staff, and faculty looked out for one another, aware of the tragedy that had once torn their community apart but determined to prevent such a horror from ever happening again. The Gallaudet murders would never be forgotten, but over time, the university's identity became not one of tragedy, but of resilience. The lessons learned in the wake of the murders were painful, but they helped to create a safer, more compassionate community. In that way, Gallaudet University, though forever changed, emerged stronger, with a commitment to ensuring that its students could pursue their dreams in safety and peace. And so life at Gallaudet went on. The campus, once scarred by fear, became a place of healing and growth. New students arrived, unaware of the darkness that had once engulfed their school, but benefiting from the safeguards and support systems that had been put in place. The story of the Gallaudet murders, though tragic, served as a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the power of community in the face of unimaginable loss. For